All right, LinkedIn Live. Here we are, live in the trap. Hi, everybody. I'm Josh, co-founder of Pantheon, back again to stream at you. And I'm bringing in a very special guest here today. My colleague, Samir Kazi, the CEO of Pantheon, joined us just under 2 years ago. We're going to talk about the state of the web, past, present, and future. And I'm really actually excited that I was able to get Samir's time to do this conversation. You know, it's I've been doing Pantheon for a while, and when new people come in who have their own experience and perspective, and they've been pros in the industry or around the industry for a while, like I get a chance to learn a bunch, which that's what really keeps me in this game, to be honest. And yeah, so it's a real pleasure, Samir, to have you here for this conversation. I think this is your first LinkedIn Live ever?
Josh, it's my LinkedIn Live debut.
Whew.
Is this the start of the Josh and Samir podcast series?
Okay, so there's like we were talking with some of those guys in Phoenix, and they're like, we're gonna get hats, we're gonna do a whole thing. Like I'm here for it. So maybe we should just this will be the start of an ongoing series.
Josh, Jamstack, and then another J thing that
totally. We can figure out ways to put all the acronyms together. For folks who haven't had a chance to meet you, though, from our audience, do you want to just give a quick intro for yourself and just talk a little bit about where you came from and how you came to Pantheon?
Happy to do it, and thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and excited to dive into this, what seems like a super big topic to me. I don't know how we're going to do it in 25 minutes. We probably need to write a tome about the past, present, and future of the CMS world. But hi, everyone. I'm Samir. I'm CEO at Pantheon. I've been in seat, as Josh mentioned, about 20 some months. And my background in software has primarily been on the MarTech side, the mirror image of the web ops and CMS world, where I spent time with lots of interesting companies thinking about the entire stack in the MarTech world, everything from data management to personalization, data orchestration, and then ultimately what all of the channels are. Yeah, that is a little bit about me. Josh, you, as I said in my little LinkedIn introduction, an OG in the web ops space. You've been at this 16 years. Some might say you're the very embodiment of the past, but also the present and the future. Tell me a little bit about your journey. What got you into the space? What's this all about?
Yeah, I think that's a good way into this, because we'll do it past, present, and future. And, my tongue-in-cheek answer to how did you get started in this career, I mean, it goes back further. I got a couple lucky breaks in high school that turned me on to a bunch of technology. But really, honestly, my professional career got a rocket boost when I got involved in politics. I tried to take over the government, Samir. We were doing political campaign work in 2003 and got involved in this Democratic presidential primary. And this guy, Howard Dean, who was the first U.S. presidential candidate. There are other politicians elsewhere that had done very similar things. It wasn't truly globally groundbreaking, but he was the first guy in the U.S. to actually put together online messaging, online organizing, and online fundraising. And it took him from like a no name in the polls to almost winning, and then spectacularly not. Heartbreak. But that introduced me to this. It introduced me to the world of Drupal. It introduced me to the power of what the internet could do if it was harnessed, and what people could do with the internet if they used it together. And then from there, I sort of built a career around being an expert in CMSs, and that eventually led to Pantheon and all that other good stuff. But it's interesting, like just reflecting back on that in the first maybe 10 years of my career, right? From that 2003 to 2013, that was just sort of like the rise of the CMS as this standard. Right. And people, WordPress was doing it with democratizing publishing. Drupal was doing it for ambitious digital experiences. And you sort of went from, there was like people talking about web 1.0, web 2.0. That's a little trite, but that was a real thing. It went from the web as something that people build by hand or with bespoke tools. And it's only really accessible to people who have that kind of rare technical skill, to people who can now easily self-publish and self-express online, which is really, that's pretty awesome to reflect on. something about that era also, though, and I want to get your take on this, that was also sort of in the same breath was the rise of the DXP as like the enterprise solution, and this concept of these all-in-one monolithic things where like we're going to rule them all. I'm curious from your, you lived those years from the MarTech side, like you said, what did you see in terms of enterprise decision making around web technology? And I know your answer to this question, but I want to hear you explain it. What's your opinion on DXP as a category?
Yeah, I, I, I also, by the way, I want you to hit this idea of like, as the CMSs rose, what were the things that made, like, why were they so important from an editorial perspective? I'd love for you to comment on that. But let me share some thoughts on the DXP space. So I was working in the MarTech world, and if you know anything about that, it's primarily, I mean, for the most part, it started off as an email marketing bit where you took, database marketing, where you built lists, got permission, and then people sent messages to others around email. And some of the big messaging in the email world as it was evolving was that context mattered, personalization mattered, one-to-one mattered, and that database marketing in its essence, once you got permission from someone, you used any context you had about that person to get just tighter and better on the messaging to that individual. As that market matured, what became clear was that more channels were needed, that orchestration, journeys and journey orchestration mattered. Decisioning around all of that, including personalization, became super important. And then as you thought about the channels, you saw email and mobile and display and some other things. And then the web bit was always off to the side for some reason, although you could use some of these systems to trigger some content personalization on the web. But most of us in the MarTech world really never thought about web that deeply. And then to realize that there's this whole category on the other side of the wall that's called the digital experience platform, where people were buying CDPs, they were buying email marketing platforms, they were buying personalization engines, DMPs and the like, or DAMs and DMPs and the like, and then building them into a more separate stack. There's nothing in technology that is indicative of siloed decision-making inside of organizations than the existential MarTech versus DXP scenario that lived on for way longer than it should have.
Yeah, no, I totally, I agree. And I think like, just look at the reality of what happened, maybe it's getting a little bit further along in the timeline, but, Scott Brinker put out his MarTech map. The first one had like 120 some odd logos on it. And like 8 years later, it was the MarTech 10,000. Like that's the opposite of things converging into like one size fits all digital experience platforms. But your question about, what was so important about that and the publishing workflow? And I think it really is like that, not everybody gets a well implemented CMS. There's lots of ways to screw it up. But when you get one that's good, you're just good enough, maybe not even excellent, but just good enough. Like what it unlocks in an organization is huge because you get to move your devs out of the production line. Right? You have people who are responsible for putting stuff online, actually doing it themselves. And then the people who are, highly prized in your organization who are technical are working on improving the overall quality of the system and adding capabilities and making better integrations and driving innovation versus in a lot of places they were stuck in, here's the Word doc, go get it on the internet. And that's just like not a great, use of human resources. So I think, the rise of the CMS empowered a lot of people and it opened up a lot of room for innovation. Which, I mean, and Pantheon, I think, was a part of that. Like we really were like and we still are today, obviously, but like that was something we did that really differentiated for people. It let them change the way they work and get more done.
I mean, so typical of technology, the idea you have these, I mean, for all intents and purposes, closed systems where you could drive a bunch of workflow to publish on the web, manage that effectively, et cetera. If that represents the past, which is really funny to say that because there's no such thing as the past, present, and future in web technologies. Like it's all mushed into one giant timeline, but the evolution of that clearly was more open systems, more headless, more composable, newer technologies emerged. What drove some of that, do you think?
Well, I think, there's a few different things, obviously. One is the moving from systems that were open in the sense that they were open source, like open source still very important, obviously, but just
Sure.
open source, but still kind of monolithic in their architecture, to open, potentially open source, potentially not, but like open for integration, like things that are built API first, things that were built to be mushed together with other stuff. That was their intended purpose. That drove, that sort of picked up the baton in the middle of the teens and really drove a lot of the conversation there. And that happened concurrently with the rise of JavaScript as the lingua franca of software, just in general. The fact that the web stack is the most commonly deployed way of building user interfaces to anything is kind of like, it's really ironic, because I remember when I started my career, people were like, that's what Java would do. The J2EE was going to run everything. And obviously that didn't work out. And the web was sort of like the redheaded stepchild of the tech world. There was, people looked down on it from a technology or software development standpoint, but now it's clearly just so super dominant, and you can build such awesome things with the web. So I think the rise of that maturity in front end development, the fact that it's well suited to integrating a whole bunch of different data sources, the fact that you could build things that weren't just like mobile responsive, like, okay, I can read it on a phone, but like it's built for a phone. Like the experience rivals that of a native app. Like all of that, and like the fact that a whole generation of web developers learned that stack first, I think it really changed a lot of things in the industry.
From the very first day that we met, Josh, which was even before I started at the company, you have always been excited about the front end of the web. You've always talked to me about that in very effusive and emotional ways. And I've seen that sort of, you and I both seen it sort of come to fruition as the past CMSs are giving way to some of these more composable, front-end heavy architectures. Is that just another way of reclassifying what was DXP? Is this something different?
Well, okay, so fair enough. Like I kind of went on my little mini rant about how cool it is to build with modern front-end tech. So just take off my nerd hat, or like halfway for a second. So there's been a rebrand in the analyst space. So now there are composable DXPs. And so the interesting thing about that is, whereas I feel like the old DXP category was like largely smoke and mirrors, the composable DXP category contains three DXPs in a trench coat telling you there's something different, right? But also some legit sort of players that came at it from a very different angle. The thing about that is that those players coming at it from a different angle, and I respect a lot of these products, like uniform.dev is a really cool product, and also unproven to a certain extent, because I think just as those products were hitting their stride and reaching maturity, people were taking a look at where we had gone with making everything decoupled, making everything headless, making everything composable, and started to recognize how much complexity that brought into the conversation, and in many cases having second thoughts about that, because they are front end heavy dev implementations, they're middleware heavy dev implementations. In a lot of those cases, the civilian end users of those systems are not really well served. Like they have a very disjointed experience. They're not sure what's going to happen when they click a button. And I think the long-term cost of maintenance for those things was underestimated in many cases. And so I think we are seeing a pendulum shift already. I mean, we're going to get to AI obviously, but even before AI rose to be the center of the narrative, I think we were already seeing people like having second thoughts about how far they went into that space.
You and I have always joked about this idea of like headless. What's the very next question? Where's the head? Like, what do we do on the front end of all of this?
Yeah.
No question about it.
Well, let me actually though then turn this question back to you though, because I think in this, as we're talking about maybe like the present or what's been happening more recently in the industry, you seeing it from your perspective as a CEO, but also like you've got your network of other people in C-suites. You sort of, I'm sure you get lots of, having the job you have now, you get lots of inquiries. Like, do executives, how do they think about this stuff? How do they evaluate it? Like, where is it on their priority list? What sort of metrics are they thinking about? Like, what do they even, like, I've had my own conversations, but you just had many more. I'm just curious to hear your take on like what's the C-suite perspective on the web and these tools and these stacks.
It's the question, even the way you frame the question has such dichotomy in it, because one part of the question is, what does the C-suite think about the web? And then what do they think about the stacks? Nobody thinks about the stacks. No one cares, as long as, because the most important digital property is the website, or websites in the case of very large enterprises. And what the C-suite really cares about is what's the business impact of visitors, and then how do you go activate those people that have the highest intent of whatever your definition of converting is. And my take has always been that it's always been a black box. I think if you think about any C-suite person's engagement with the web team, guaranteed every CEO has a vision about what their website needs to be. They implement it by talking to their CMO or somebody on the marketing team. And then the answer to the question always is, hey, boss, we've got to go do all this other work before we can finally get to the things that you think you want to do. And what should be a real-time or near real-time engagement where an executive can impact something very quickly is just not the case. And it is still not the case today. The idea that one would dream up a marketing campaign, get a landing page launched, get all of the content done, get the design work done, get it live, and do that in a meaningful short period of time. And I don't mean for smaller companies or for individuals. I mean for large enterprises. Again, this indication of silos at those companies, it's a virtual impossibility. It just does not happen. And it's super frustrating to everybody in the C-suite, regardless of what the stack is behind it.
Interesting. And just, for compare and contrast, in your experience, are there other, from your MarTech days, are there other examples of other types of things where you're used to seeing that agility?
I think one of the most important changes that happened in MarTech was the rise of the CDP. It's questionable in today's world and moving forward, but you rewind 10 years ago, and the CDP was a very interesting innovation because what it did was it unlocked data that was sitting in large data warehouses and brought it super close to the marketer and everybody else at the company. So when you had customer data, and then you augmented that data with real-time browsing intent, and then was able to segment people out of that and then create content and decision making almost in real time around that. That blew my mind when I figured out that one could do that. So if you saw stuff happening on the website and you wanted to send a message out to a subset of those people, the ability for the CMO or the CEO, if they were that intentioned, to have a conversation and have a team go drive that impact in a different channel was remarkable to me. I've been waiting for that to happen in the web world. It has not happened yet.
Yeah, totally. I mean, the use case of personalization, it's like been around forever and everyone's still super unsatisfied, right? Like you have the signals coming in, like you can use web engagement as a signal, but then actually activating a different experience path through that, even like the technology to do that is complicated. And even if you get all the technology right, then the teams realize that they need a content strategy that's much more complex than, because now there's multiple branching waves and they actually have to have the full path for all the personas, which they didn't really have before. And I've seen customers of ours and I've seen agency partners of ours just, so many times run aground on that just because it was so much work to do that. And it's actually, now that you're saying it, I can see like, yeah, right. But you've been able to do that if you wanted to like switch up the email path someone's on real quick. If you want to change what display ads are surfacing to an audience, like that's table stakes now in the B2C world. And it is weird that the web is still lagging. And I think that's in part of this like past, present, and future. Like this is a technology that was around 30 plus years ago. And I'm not saying that that's still literally the implementation people are dealing with, but we have a lot of legacy in this market, and people carrying stuff forward with them.
I can almost hear you say one-to-one and multi-channel. 2010 called it once, it's one-to-one back. route.
Well, so that's where I was going to go. I was like, but now with AI, because that's like a great segue to like the future we want to talk about. It really is like the level of effort it takes to create, bespoke content paths and so forth for these different audiences, or even going down to one is now reasonable. It's manageable.
It's almost zero
Yeah.
effort.
Yeah, I think it's not zero effort to get the systems in place, but then once they're up in place and running, then yeah, it's just the token cost, right? But you're 100% right, which is, yeah, great. So now you've caught up to where the rest of the industry was about 14 years ago. Well done, pat on the head. Where are you going next? But I think that is the question for us in the future, where a lot of the bottlenecks for the web have been around production. I mean, whether that's web development production, web content production, I'm not like I'm very cautious of a world of reduced quality, increased volume AI slop, because that we've all seen that in various places and nobody really likes it. But the fact is that production bottleneck it doesn't exist anymore. And so where are we going now? Like what is coming next?
I'm optimistic that a bunch of Pantheon and other agency partners are either watching the LinkedIn Live now, or hopefully will watch it at some point in the future. I think the impact of AI is most prevalent in those agencies that are at the front end of doing this work, and I think there's an evolution that needs to happen. It's again in so many things that are dichotomous in our world. On one hand, we have the prevalence of vibe coding that's come up in a very material way, and on the other hand, there are a whole bunch of companies trying to figure out their business model and how they can serve enterprises and serious businesses who have websites that matter. And I think that there is a bridge between these two things. What Pantheon's been doing in the entirety of its history is, in addition to the DevOps tools that we provide, providing the framework of governance, security, et cetera, to keep sites secure, stable, performant. How do you think that changes in the world of AI, or does it?
I mean, I think it only becomes more and more of a necessity. And I think, we've always had this cool value prop, and we've worked with a bunch of these big organizations and big institutions where it was a non-negotiable for them because they were stewarding a brand. Like, I just still flash back to that conference I went to at Yale, where they had the guy come out and explain that the color blue that they use at Yale is from this original graduation gown that's kept in like a sealed neon gas-filled lockbox because like we're preserving 275 years of history, right? So we've had this ability to serve people that took themselves that seriously for a long time. I just think that you need this governance, and you need this oversight. You need command of what's going on within your web space. Even if you're a little guy, if you want to be afloat in the era of AI, if you want to leverage vibe coding for something that's not just a throwaway, that's not just a prototype, that's not just a static thing. Like, okay, probably if you're like a very small business and you're just putting up a local brochure page, you could just vibe it out. It's fine. People are doing that today, and it's awesome. But if you're even slightly more serious than that, like if you have a website, again, that terminology, if your website really matters, you got to think about what is the framework you're putting in place around all this stuff. You can't just cowboy code it. It's just not going to work anymore. You're not going to know what's going on. You're going to lose track of the details. You're going to get stuck in, you're going to get vibed into a bad situation that you can't get yourself easily out of. And there's plenty of, there's a reason you can go onto the job boards and find people posting, I'm a vibe coding cleanup expert, and their calendar is full. So I think it only becomes more important. And I think for us, it's our chance to meet the moment where there's a lot of people that haven't had to figure this out before. And they have shied away from some of this stuff because it felt like overhead. It felt like, oh, governance, like, oh, it's going to slow me down. And I think what we've proven historically in our career is that when you have it done the right way, you can move faster with more confidence if your stuff is set up right than you could if you were just kind of freeballing the whole thing. That's counterintuitive for people, but once the reason I believe this is like once people adopted our way, once they adopted kind of the web ops approach, none of them went back. There's no people who switched back because it's like, oh, it's too much overhead. They just kept building from there. we're gonna be at time soon, so I want to steer this a little bit back towards something you just mentioned, because I want to hear your thoughts on it. We talk with a lot of agencies, we talk with internal web teams. I know you have you wrote a whole research paper about how AI is going to transform things, and have thought deeply about it, and thought deeply about how it's going to change organizations. So what do you think a future web organization will look like? As this stuff starts to settle out, and we really we get used to AI being a permanent part of our workflow.
I think that as much as things will change, I think many things will continue to remain very, very important. So I genuinely believe that platforms will matter. Very flexible platforms that can scale and can be highly performant will continue to matter. And that in the world of agents doing a bunch of work for us, this is not at the expense of the human. I think it's the human with the AI is definitely the future. And in the world of the web, in my opinion, the customer context has always been and will always continue to be the most important consideration. Anything that can accelerate driving to whatever the customers or the visitor or the viewer's context is, those are the companies that will win. Anything that can help us tune in deeper on that is the winner for sure. What's your last word on this?
I mean, I think to me, it's going to be, I think expertise is going to become more and more important, and not that it isn't already, but I think the people who are able to deeply understand systems, but then also delegate the work of managing them they're already gaining superpowers, and that's only going to increase. I agree. I mean, we're both super biased now, but yes, of course, platforms will matter a ton. I think, innovation though is just what we think of as innovation today is, AI skeptics will kind of point out that well, yeah, all these people are using AI, but is Uber a better app now than it was a year ago? And I think the answer is I haven't noticed much difference. But the amount of creativity that's being unleashed by these tools is going to let us really do things that are going to surprise and delight a lot of people. And so I think, to me, the platforms that let people leverage their expertise and not just produce more output, although being able to be more productive is good, but produce higher quality and more impactful output. That's really what the game is going to be all about. All right, we are right up against our time. There were a bunch of questions because we promoted this on a few different LinkedIn threads that I'm going to pull in 2 questions from those threads. We had a bunch more, but we'll get to more of them. Food fodder for future live series is, what should I be asking my agency right now? That's a good question.
That is a good question.
I'll go first, and I'll be brief. I'll try to make myself be brief so you have a chance to answer. I mean, I think the question to ask the agency now is, one, where are we showing up when people are asked, what are people asking AI that's relevant to our business, and how are we showing up? Because that's just a huge sea change. So we're not going back. The way people discover information is different now than it was before, and if you don't have a plan for that, you should get started building one. I think it's the number one thing to ask.
Mine is slightly different. I would say, again, in the voice of customer context, I think every website has a business outcome. And I think even more important now is to ask your agencies, after you share what your business outcomes are, how do you plan on helping us achieve that? And that's some mix of some strategy and business operations work, but it's also how all of the tech stack comes together to make that happen, with that being at the focus of everything that the agency does.
Yeah, that's so important. I think expecting the agency to be a strategic value add, not just an execution arm.
Absolutely.
Super important. All right, I think we're going to leave it there because we are at time, and there were a bunch more questions. I don't want to privilege one. Thank you, Samir, for joining me. This was fun, and we will have to have you back on our live stream series.
Always a great time, Josh. Thanks so much.
All right, take care, man. See ya.
Cheers.